Hello. What was up with my voice? Hello, everybody. I have been eating one meal a day for over the last 6 years now. And to be honest with you, it's been a great experience for me. But at the same time, I have seen a lot of people, for example, a couple of my clients, not do so well with fasting. So today, we are going to be covering fasting over your 40s. Is it good? Who is it for? Is it bad? Who is it bad for? And how can you fast without losing muscle mass or becoming malnourished or essentially lefting off worse than where you started? That's what we're going to be covering today. And if you're wondering who I am, I'm Samarth. I've been the founder of Growing Young over the last 5 years. We're necessarily a team of healthcare professionals, so doctors, trainers, nutritionists, geneticists, physiotherapists, and we curate personalized programs to not just help our people meet their health goals, but more importantly, keep them over time. And besides that, I've also been a coach for the last 16 years now, and I've coached over hundreds of busy professionals. In fact, over 1,300 odd busy professionals as of this year to not just beat diseases like lifestyle diseases, diabetes, fatty liver, other lifestyle diseases, but more importantly, help them build a condition of their body to last into the future. That's basically who I am. To be very clear with you, I am not a doctor, right? I have never been a doctor. In the perceivable future, also, I don't think I will be in the foreseeable future. I don't think I will be a doctor either. But today's life is going to be based on my years of research, not just on fasting and hunger, but more importantly, looking at how that works with people over the age of 40 with busy lifestyles. So let's get right into it. Right? In order for you to understand whether fasting works or not, it's very important to first quickly define what fasting is. Fasting is just the process of not eating food. That's it. Right? All you do is drink water, maybe some multivitamins if you're deficient, but that's it. You might have heard of a lot of people saying I'm fruit fasting or I'm fasting with sabudana or something like that. People do that in India. This is not considered fasting because if you are eating such foods, then your body will be taking energy from those foods, and hence you will not be receiving the benefit of fasting, which is something called autophagy. Autophagy is a process that your body undergoes where it eats malfunctioning or dirty cells to basically just fuel the body in times of need. Now, whether you fast or not, autophagy happens in your body. To be very clear, fasting accelerates autophagy, and which is why it's also known to be one of the best longevity practices by notable names like people like David Sinclair. Right. And as I speak about autophagy, I would like to remove a misconception over here. Fasting, right, like I said, increases the speed at which your body goes through autophagy. It is not true to say that if you don't fast you will not go through autophagy, because the body has its own cleaning system which it keeps following anyways. But having said that, how do you know if fasting is for you, right? So let's say you're a busy professional over the age of 40. You may have a little bit of lifestyle diseases, or let's say you just have a very busy and hectic lifestyle. How do you know if fasting is for you? Now, fasting has multiple uses. Fat loss is not one of them, and I'll explain to you why that is not true as we move ahead, even though you may have already lost fat, excuse me, while fasting. Let's look at exactly who it is for. So, if you're over the age of 40 and you don't have any lifestyle diseases, you don't have any issues like vertigo, essentially dizziness, like of other things like height or looking down, or you're not really feeling any drops in blood pressure, fasting may be for you. How do you know if fasting is for you? To be honest, the first thing that you should be doing, whether it's for you or not, is to be doing a blood report and a body composition test to see whether it spots out anything. For example, a lot of people are vitamin D deficient, right? So if these individuals have begun to fast, while being severely vitamin D deficient, that may not work out in the long term. But having said that, if you have done your blood test, you are not malnourished, you have your protein intake on point, you have your good fats on point, then you can consider fasting. And again, like the name suggests, what you do is you avoid consuming calories. Whether that's liquid or solid, you avoid consuming calories. So now what happens when you do that? Many people claim that it increased their energy levels. For me, for example, it did increase my energy levels by a drastic amount when I switched to one meal a day. Some people claim that it improves bowel systems. It improves, like the movement of stools. Basically, you can just shit better because your body has the time to essentially go through that entire phase where it's moving food out. Now, who is fasting not for? And I think that is the important question that we need to answer. If you are somebody whose blood sugar levels keep spiking and going up and down, or you have a severe case of diabetes, fasting may not be for you. Or at least going down, like fasting 18 hours a day may not be for you. You may want to start with somewhere around 8 to 10 hours and then slowly progress towards a larger time frame of fasting or larger window of fasting. But if you are somebody whose sugar levels fluctuate up and down drastically, I wouldn't recommend you fasting. In fact, even for ladies, I usually do not recommend fasting for women. In fact, I always suggest a minimum of 2 meals a day because the research is very clear on fasting for women and how it doesn't benefit them, especially if they're pregnant. Needless to say. Now that we know who fasting is for and who it isn't for, we also need to understand what is the safe way to fast, right? What is the right way to do it and what is the wrong way to do it? Now, the right way to fast is honestly a very simple equation. What you do is when you are fasting, before you're fasting, like I said before, get your blood reports, see if you're malnourished. If you are malnourished, correct it. If you're not malnourished, or let's say you've been eating a little bit less protein, fix that before you start fasting and cut out the first meal, right, that you dislike. So, for example, many people say that, okay, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That is not true, right? In fact, that was a marketing lobby that was created by other couple of notable brands like Kellogg's, but we'll get into that a little bit deeper in some other life. But for today's life, you need to understand that fasting is first about sustainability and then about ideal practices, right? Because there are good practices that can be done sustainably, and then there are ideal practices. So, ideally, if you are fasting, what you would do is you would reduce to say 1 to 2 meals a day, somewhere in between the midday. Now, if you're somebody who dislikes breakfast or you're somebody who dislikes dinner, you can go ahead and start by skipping those meals first, right? That's how we start building to ideal cadence, for a lack of better terms. Personally, I like to eat my 1 meal a day at night once I finish all my work and just go at it. If you are like that, you can too. Just make sure that you are finishing that 1 meal at least 4 to 5 hours before bedtime, because eating a lot of food before bedtime does mess up your sleep despite how drowsy and quickly you fall asleep, how drowsy you are and how quickly you fall asleep. But having said that, here's the question that most people ask me: Samarth, if I fast, will I lose weight? And I think that is a huge question to answer. But on a simple reality, let me put it this way. Let's say that person A eats 3 burgers in the morning and 5 burgers for dinner, and he is maintaining his weight. Now, let's say that this person reduces the times, right? So he cuts out what he's eating in the morning and puts it in the evening. So he eats 3 burgers in the evening and 5 in the night. So totally 8, similar, exactly the same as what he was eating before. Despite fasting, this individual will not lose weight because fasting helps you reduce the amount that you eat by reducing the time in which you eat it. But fat loss, especially, is always determined by how much your daily deficit of food is. So, if you're using fasting as a tool to reduce the number of times you eat, and hence making your life easier to cut out the calories that you want for fat loss, that you can do. If you are trying to use fasting as the only way to lose fat just because you're reducing the amount of time in which you eat, that will not lead to fat loss. Of course, it may have certain other benefits, but it will definitely not lead to fat loss. And an important point that I just remembered is that if you are somebody who has autoimmune conditions like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis in your gut, fasting may not be for you unless you have spoken to a professional about it. And with this said, a lot of the issue that comes with fasting, which what most people do, is that they essentially use fasting as a mechanism to cleanse the body when the body is already malnourished. This is a big issue that I see, especially amongst the Indian population. Because when they think about fasting, they think about cutting out a lot of food, but they do not think about adequately nourishing themselves with the type of food that they need during the meals to make sure that their life is going smoothly. So, what this does is it actually not just makes fasting harmful for you, but more importantly, works against your health. So, it's like you're actually putting in effort to fast and it's working against you. So, how do we make sure that this does not happen? The number one thing to do is to make sure that your protein intake is on point. Right? The average individual should be consuming around roughly 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that is a basic measure that you want to maintain, especially while fasting. Make sure that you know your vitamin D, your vitamin B12, all of this is also taken care of. Now, if you are somebody who starts to feel tired during fasting, there are two important things that you can do. Number one is supplement with creatine. Right? Needless to say that creatine is the most safe drug or most safe supplement in the world. But because of its appearance of looking like a drug and almost sort of looking like cocaine, if you look at it in detail, it gets a bad rap. But when it comes to fasting, drinking creatine is one of the best things that you can do. Now, besides that, if you're saying, no, Samath, I don't want to drink creatine, I want to stay natural, and we'll get into what natural means. And in fact, we've gotten into that on our on our fruit and vegetables and its connection to evolution video. But remember that overall, your job is to be nourished when you're fasting. So creatine helps. And if at all you don't want to do creatine, you can do electrolytes, right? So Gatorade is a good example. Um, Coconut water can be a decent way to break your fast, but it cannot help you during the fast because it actually has a lot of, not a lot of, but some level of sugar in it. So that sort of breaks you out of the fast. So big picture for you to remember. Fasting helps in fat loss by reducing the amount of time that you are allowed to eat food. It does not make fat loss happen as a mechanism. Fasting helps cleanse your body, but if you are malnourished, it may end up removing essential nutrients from your body, which can make you sicker. And how to gain muscle and lose fat while fasting, for example, like I have, which is that if you're curious to know, I have been around say 12 to 14% body fat for the last 6 to 7 years now with just one meal a day. Of course, there have been days where I've eaten 2 to 3 meals, but let's say that would have happened for 20% of the entire time. So my experience with it is that it is a tool if used correctly. But the problem with tools is that they can be double-ended swords, right? Which is that you basically try to stab your problem with a sword, but instead you end up stabbing yourself. And that is what fasting can be if done incorrectly. And if you're curious to understand a little bit more about fasting, what its effects are on longevity, and how you can do it for your particular body type, feel free to reach out with the word growth. So you can just DM me the word growth, or you can just comment it on this live in the comments. And my team will reach out to you to schedule a privatized health consult and a personalized health consult to make sure that not only are we addressing any key issues you may be facing during fasting or because of fasting, but also tell you how you can do it sustainably and correctly. But that was it for today's live. And for the next live, we're actually going to be going deep into the concept of hunger, one of the most important points that you need to learn while fasting. And in fact, if you learn about hunger correctly, you can actually mimic a lot of the positive results that come with, for example, GLP-1s, which was what we discovered in the last live. Because if you know how to control your hunger, which means that if you're able to tell the difference between when you're hungry versus when your mouth is lonely, it's not just fasting, but fat loss and almost any other health goal that you are looking for becomes more in your radius of control. So if that interests you, I will see you next week on fasting and how to make sure that you understand hunger to fast safely and effectively. Hope you enjoyed today. See you soon, ladies and gentlemen.